So in this segment, we're going to be talking about Reform's kind of broader strategy going into the next election, and it's going to be focused mostly on asylum seekers and the hotels and the facilities that they are placed in. And so here you have Andrea Jenkins with the most insane takes.
Good people of Greater Lincolnshire want 10 refugee camps in their backyards.
So what Jenkins is saying, like, they're just going to, instead of putting them in hotels, they're going to put them in tents. And so it's where are you going to put the tents?
No, I'm not talking. I'm talking about as they come across, as they have it in France.
So down in Dover?
Well, yeah, I do that as a temporary situation.
Why would the good people of Dover want tents and refugee camps on their doorsteps?
Also, I mean, Reform's correct that we must come out of the ECHR so we can start pushing people back. I mean, what I really don't understand is that we've given millions, and even when I was Conservative MP, I challenged the government on this, giving millions to France. They leave a safe country to come to...
Yeah, France can't really stop them. That's the problem. Like, there's not a lot they can do.
Another safe country.
I totally agree with you on that.
So with France.
I totally agree with you on that. But in what world will the people of Dover advocate refugee-style camps like we see in the third world with tents erected in their backyards? They just won't want that.
Well, it's got to be a contained area. It's got to be a contained area to then we've got to send them back to France. We've got to start.
I mean, France aren't going to take them back. We don't have a returns agreement because of Brexit, because of what you guys did. Like, you guys caused this. So I don't, the kind of protestations around this are hilarious because it's like, you guys caused this mess. Now you're upset about it.
My whole point is we've got to send them back to France. France aren't
going to take them back.
They shouldn't be coming over in the first place.
Is your tent idea your idea, or has it been endorsed by the party? Because Reform sort of distanced themselves from this.
Makes sense because it's stupid. But there's more here. There's more of her talking.
No, I haven't. But the fact is, I mean, I just like you and everybody else, we see.
This is an elected mayor here. Just to let you know, she's just got elected as mayor of this area, and instead of talking about issues that affect local people, she's talking about asylum seekers that aren't a big deal in Lincolnshire.
On YouTube,
I'm not trying to trick you. I'm asking.
No,
and the only reason I'm asking is
Yes.
because having reported from there quite extensively myself, I can say that one of the things that local French people hate most about that is seeing people in tents. So much so that the French police confiscate their tents. So it would seem a bit of a curious policy to try and emulate.
Well, no, I mean, look, it happens in other countries, and also, but we've got to get to
my whole. Look,
my whole point of making this statement is that we are soft touch Britain, and we're acting like bees to honey by putting people in hotels, by, they get the accommodation, they get their food paid. I mean, look, some Conservative-led councils have even paid for driving lessons.
The driving lessons thing is a bit outrageous, but as for the rest of it, it's like you don't allow people to work. So what do you want them to do, starve, or do you want them to rely on charities? Discussion around the tent cities and whatever. Like, there are tents all over town centres and things like that because of the fact that we don't even house people that are homeless here. Not to pit one against the other, but it's like this idea of people being accepting of tents is ridiculous, because I've heard people complain about it in the town centre where I live. But also the fact that complaining that for food is like, okay, let them work then. Other countries allow refugees to work. The reason why we don't allow that here is in case they can get a work visa or some nonsense.
This is taxpayers' money, and it should actually be tents, not rent. It should actually be, and British people are charitable, Lewis, but they're struggling themselves now.
I wonder why they're struggling. Is it because of the government you're a part of, causing an absolute mess economically for the last 15 years?
Energy costs are at an all-time high. Mortgage rates, my mortgage went up £800 a month when the fixed rate...
The hell kind of house do you have for your mortgage to go up that much?
Finished. So I know what it's like to struggle as a single parent, and
I don't think you do, buddy. I'll be honest.
So people are struggling. So why should the British people be putting people in hotels out of their own pocket when
just fucking process the applications? All you have to do is process the applications. If they get accepted, they can get moved into either supported living or some sort of system where they can be allowed to work and progress in life. And if it gets rejected, they get sent back.
Be happy to see.
So
you'd be
hard.
happy. You'd be content. As the mayor of Greater Lincolnshire, you can have a role in this. If there are roads with people in with tents, you're content with that.
It's got to be a confined area. I mean, I have
confined to where? Like, you're gonna have to get those people in those areas to accept that. Good luck with that.
to say this isn't a reform policy.
If there were children, should they be in tents?
the fact is, we've got to stop the pull to Britain with this. And why are we paying these millions and millions of pounds to France when people come from a safe country such as France to come here? We should be sending them back to France.
We can't, lady. I've just explained that. Honestly, the fact that Goodall doesn't explain it is just tragic.
So if there were children in Lincolnshire, unaccompanied migrants, and they were in tents on the roadside,
Well, how are they
your
going to get
message
here
is
in the
okay.
first place? You know,
I know, but once they are here,
place?
if they're in a tent, that's okay with you.
What percentage is actually children? The majority of them
There
is
are some.
actually, but the majority is economic migrants, Lewis. They've got the mobile phones. It's usually young men who come across.
Yeah, they seek asylum here, so then they can send for their family members, so you don't have to make the journey across the channel.
And we've got to stop this pull to Britain. We've got to be able to push.
You talk about how great this country is, and they're like, "No, we've got to stop all that." But yeah, Nigel Farage intending to use Reform UK's control of 10 councils to launch taxpayer-funded legal challenges against net zero policies and migrant housing. So this is their strategy for the next election. They're gonna really push on these two levers. And is Zia Yusuf talking about it here in this clip?
Having asylum hotels in their communities. This has caused a lot of concern to many people, but you've told them that you will reject migrants going from the council areas that you now control. How will you actually do that? Because the contracts to house those people are between the Home Office and accommodation providers. You don't have the power, perhaps, to keep the promise that you've made.
So what I think he's going to do, because he doesn't have the power, and he talks about that, is cause such a stink that the Home Office won't be able to put people there. And like this person points out, they'll pass them on to other areas basically, and that will happen is it will overload other areas, and that's where you get more and more social discontent.
There are instruments of power available to us.
Well, like what?
Judicial reviews, injunctions. There's planning laws. A lot of these hotels, and there has been litigation around this already. A lot of these hotels, when you suddenly turn them into something else, which is essentially a hostel, that falls foul of a number of regulations, and that's what our teams of lawyers are exploring at the moment. And we can look at budgets as well. So the word we used was resist. Look, we're not in government yet. That's our plan, and that's why people watching this programme who believe in these values, who don't want to live around people whose first action upon coming to this country was to break our laws and then to live.
It's not illegal to seek asylum in a country. It's not illegal to arrive in a country by irregular means. Is nonsense.
At the behest of taxpayer money.
But the question here is the difference between saying things and doing things. Yeah. And you will be in office now in local government in much of England, and you've told people publicly that you will resist migrants coming to their communities.
Yeah.
But you don't have the direct power to do anything about it. Are you saying Reform's lawyers will try to use the courts to close asylum hotels? I'm trying to understand what you'll actually do.
There are a number of instruments at our disposal, which are...
I would have asked him about taxpayer funding, to be honest. Is he happy with council taxpayers to foot the bill for these legal challenges, which could run for tens of thousands?
Teams are working. We've already just won the election, right? So what we're going to be doing in Reform Control Council, this is our commitment. We will use every instrument available to us. And those include things like injunctions, those include things like judicial reviews, those include things like actually enforcing the planning laws, because we think a lot of these changes that are being made are in violation of...
I just wonder if the Home Office can put people there and then go through the court process, or does the injunction stop that until afterwards? That's the thing I'm kind of querying. He talks about DEI and diversity, inclusion, that kind of stuff. He straight stole that from America. This stuff is used mostly when you have two very close candidates. It's become a big talking point in games because they keep trying to force certain things into games, which I think is just silly. Because games are meant to be fictional, it's not meant to be a real thing anyways, but they keep trying to force diverse elements into games, and it just ruins them. But the whole DEI thing is such an American concept. He's talking about they think they can win about 350 to 400 MPs at the next election, which I think gives them a majority, but I don't see that happening. They're struggling to get qualified councillors, forget getting qualified MPs, and Farage talking about basically firing a load of people here in councils when these are people on contracts. If you try and fire them, it's going to go to tribunal and it's going to cost the council a fortune.
We are going to be quite radical. Work from home, forget it.
Again, work from home, forget it, right? This brother's literally working from home. You can see his wardrobe in the background. So, the argument is work from home is ridiculous. This is a guy who never goes to his constituency meetings.
If you're a DEI officer, I suggest you look for another job. So things are going to be different. We can't wave magic wands. We don't pretend to, but it'll be a very different approach to local government.
Ridiculous. The use of talking about, restoring pride and things like that.
What we need to do is instill a sense of pride in the United Kingdom, a sense of pride in our history. And right now there is a writ large demoralisation campaign that has happened for young people. And you hear it time and time and time again in schools. It's one reason why Reform is polling at 1 in 5 18 to 25-year-olds now support Reform, because they're sick and tired of it. And look, we are living in a competitive world.
They're sick and tired of having a lack of opportunities. That's why you guys are doing well with that age group. You're trying to appeal to them via, TikTok and things like that. But, the main two parties haven't offered a lot for young people. Not even close.
We're competing with countries who don't tell their young people that they should hate their country, that they should be ashamed.
No one's telling people to hate England or be ashamed of them. England does have a shameful past, yes. But given the fact that we learn about World War II, one of the few wars Britain's on the right side of, how is that fostering hatred?
You
don't even discuss like the Bengal famine and stuff like that in the context of learning about Churchill.
History. And Reform is a deeply patriotic party, and we think we should ensure that children, at the very least, are not being indoctrinated to hate their country. And what they should really be doing, we should be ensuring that they are taught the great things that Britain has provided the world.
Like what? There was this clip here of a Labour MP, Tim Mont, I can't remember his name, was talking about the grooming gangs, and then, she calls it a dog whistle.
I don't know whether you saw the documentary on Channel 4 about rape gangs.
We want to blow that little trumpet now, do we? Yeah, okay.
And
there is a real issue.
Let's get that dog whistle out, shall we? Yeah.
I think one of the issues around this conversation is they always focus on kind of Asian grooming gangs, when there was a white group of people who were arrested for essentially running a paedophile gang, except they won't use that particular phrasing. But I want it all exposed. If you're doing public inquiries into this, I'd want every person who's ever covered up one of these crimes to be questioned over it. As to what's happened. I'm talking a national inquiry of any time where you had a group of people exploiting kids like this. I'd want to know exactly what is going on here. And I think they're using this in the race context of just focusing on Asian grooming gangs, all of them. Because there are allegations. It's not. I don't think it's in this country, but the two of the candidates, potential candidates to become the new pope, have allegations over them around, covering up grooming, child grooming. You have, I think it was the former archbishop in this country who's had allegations around some cover-ups as well, I believe. And so, I'd want it all exposed, every single person, every single group exposed. And I think that's kind of what she was trying to say very clumsily, potentially. But I don't think, Labour need to be very careful about this. And, they are, apparently treating Reform more as a threat, but it seems more control C, control V of their policies. The party are a bit of a mess. You have people who are there just waiting on an alternative, really. This person who was elected as a councillor and has already been suspended, saying, I'm a Reform candidate, I'm waiting for Rupert and Ben to give us a real alternative, then I'll defect. I'm far from being the only one. So it's not as stable a coalition as it looks like, with the fact that she's openly saying, I'm waiting for Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib to come up with an alternative, and that she'll leave it. So to show you that Reform aren't even all that, to be honest with you. But they only have to hold on for one election, really. That's all. All he's got to do is win one. Labour targets international students claiming asylum after loss to Reform in local elections, just learning all the wrong lessons from this stuff. But we'll discuss Labour properly in another video. Andrea Jenkins vows to sack council's diversity officers, except there aren't any. So she's going to fire no one. So stupid. That's what I mean. They ran on this policy of getting rid of diversity officers and stuff like that, and then in some areas there just aren't any, which is okay. Here's the use of being asked about the winter fuel allowance.
That you're using the word resist, but of course you're now in power in these council areas, so you aren't just a party of protest now. You're going to be governing, and as you said, you want Nigel Farage to be Prime Minister. So let's ask some questions about how you would govern. I think one of the biggest issues, maybe the biggest issue for Labour on the doorstep, was the winter fuel allowance and the decision by Rachel Reeves to take that away from most pensioners. What would you do about the winter fuel allowance? Would you restore it for those pensioners?
Absolutely. We'd restore it straight away. Look, it was saved supposedly 1.5 billion.
How are you going to pay for that?
So this is it. Like, you know, I think they're going to face a lot more questioning around how they're going to pay and things like that. And if you look at the polling around the winter fuel allowance, you can see here it was Labour's most unpopular policy. So you can see here this is proportion aware of the incident and net percentage saying it reflects positively. So you can see the majority of people knew this. The one thing they knew Labour had done, and it polls very, very badly amongst voters. So it does show you how bad this policy has gone down with certain groups of people.
It was supposed to save 1.5 billion. We're going to do something else, by the way. You know, one of the most
it hasn't saved anything because you had more people applying for pension credit.
Devastatingly unfair things about that was that it happened in the context of Britain having the highest energy costs in the world due to the mad energy policies, the net zero.
It wasn't down to net zero. Net zero is barely much of a cost on energy bills. I think it's like 50 quid a year or something like that.
A religion that has afflicted almost everyone in Westminster, which will verse 2. 1.5 billion. We're still spending 13.5 billion a year on foreign aid. The Asylum hotels alone at 3.5.
So you'd cut foreign aid to restore the winter fuel allowance?
Absolutely. Well, hold on. It's not just that. There's the net zero costs, which the direct cost of the taxpayer of the net zero policies are 11 billion.
It's very clear. I asked Richard Tice last week how he would pay for renationalisation of British Steel, and he couldn't answer that. But you answered that question very clearly. Cut foreign aid to restore the winter fuel allowance.
I mean, I think that policy will go down very well in the UK, like, sadly enough. Because people don't realise how important foreign aid is in terms of, you know, they're always like, oh, why are they coming here? Why don't you stay where they are? It's like there's nothing where they are. There's no prospects, you know, for people that are coming here for economic reasons and the people fleeing conflict and stuff like that. There's barely any support where they are, so they seek a better life. Like, it's not that difficult. Last one, back to Jenkins. You know, her tent idea. You have Ava Santina saying this is essentially what happened at Manston Detention Centre. It led to an outbreak of, I can't tell what illness that is. I don't know what that is. People died. One woman was forced to live in a freezing tent for 11 days, and she miscarried. So, you know, 2 former prime ministers, 3 former home secretaries may have to give evidence in inquiry into serious allegations of chaos and unlawful activity at a centre used to hold cross-channel. It says migrants, should be asylum seekers. So this from April this year, that is possible. So it's going to happen. So the UK did try this, but you can't keep people in tents, especially in such a cold country as well. It doesn't make sense. So she's an idiot. Let's be honest now. These people are the biggest clowns outside any circus right now. And I'm not talking about funny clowns either. I'm talking about the menacing ones. So her plan is stupid, but it's going to get a lot of oxygen because A, it saves people money, and B, it's less money for foreign people. And so I guarantee this is going to do the rounds in the media for a while. Leaving the ECHR as well, they're going to make that seem like a good idea when it's not. There are many reasons why we need to stay in the ECHR beyond the altruistic ones. So there are pragmatic reasons as well. Labour learning the wrong lessons, but we'll do a deep dive into Labour soon. Can the reform kind of, you know, are they going to be able to pick sensible candidates? Probably not. I don't know how much that's going to hamper them because, again, like, it just depends on how hated Labour could become over the next couple of years. That's what's really going to decide the next election because the Tories aren't major players. It's going to be down to mostly Labour versus Reform in a lot of areas, and the Tories versus Lib Dems in other areas. So that's the main contest. I think the Greens will probably snipe some seats here and there. I don't think they'll do that great because their messaging has been completely awful. Like, I don't know what's going on, but they clearly need some outside help to figure out what they should be doing because they should focus on economic justice and building the Green Revolution as much as possible in the UK. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Clearly, Reform's strategy is to run mostly on racism and hatred of asylum seekers, and now they've got a much bigger platform to do it. So it'd be interesting to see how that kind of plays out. But yeah, like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.